thousands of mourners for a final farewell.
Seeing the body was just very emotional and really powerful.
600 years in the making. Currents News has team coverage from the Vatican. Will his death open the door to new rules for retired popes?
That's the million-dollar question. That's the question everyone is asking right now.
And now, does Francis have the green light? Will he step down? I'm Christine Persichetti. We've got those answers right now. This is Currents News. Catholics from all over the world descending on the Vatican, bidding farewell to Benedict and witnessing history. No longer hidden from the world, the Pope Emeritus lying in state, an unprecedented moment for the modern church. Pope Francis will preside over his funeral on Thursday, bringing the historically unique situation, the time of two popes living on the same grounds, to an unusual close. Because Benedict retired, his funeral will be unlike anything the church has ever seen. We begin our team coverage tonight with Melissa Corsi, who's standing by in St. Peter's Square. Hi, Melissa.
Christine, the Vatican is going unscripted for the first time in a long time. In fact, for the first time in 600 years. That's when the last retired pope passed away. One of Benedict's last wishes was for a simple funeral, and that's what the Vatican's preparing for.
Normally after a papal death, cardinals flock to Rome for a conclave and the world awaits this white smoke, indicating a new pope has been chosen. But not now. For the first time in modern history, a papal funeral will have the current pontiff as the presider. Father Michael Baggett, a professor at Regina Apostolorum in Rome, will be celebrating the funeral mass on Thursday.
I think the church is discerning the best way to show respect for the years of service that Ratzinger, Pope Benedict lived, to show respect above all for the years of service as the successor of Peter, while at the same time recognizing that we are not in a period without a pope. We already have a pope guiding and shepherding.
Tens of thousands are arriving in Rome to pay their respects to the 265th pope. According to church doctrine, a former pope must be buried 4 to 6 days after his death and wear red, the color of mourning for deceased popes. Benedict XVI's funeral will follow all these norms. The only exceptions are the lack of papal symbols on his body, such as the crosier or silver staff topped with a crucifix, and the pallium, a cloth band worn around the neck by archdiocesan bishops.
Pope Benedict had a shorter papacy, and he also in a sense, said goodbye to the world almost a decade ago. So we've gone through some of our grieving process, we've gone through some of our goodbyes, but I've been so encouraged to see perhaps a more subdued but profound and real outpouring of love.
Father Baggett says during this week he has seen thousands of pilgrims paying their respects to the late pope. Additionally, he says private masses are being offered inside St. Peter's at the side altars every hour, a true testimony to the love the faithful had for him.
After the funeral mass, Benedict XVI's body will be buried below the Basilica in the papal crypt, near the body and the remains of St. Peter the Apostle. At the Vatican, Melissa Corsi, Currents News.
Melissa, Pope John Paul II was also buried there, right?
Correct. In fact, Pope Benedict XVI will be buried in the same tomb where Pope John Paul II's body was originally laid in 2005, after his funeral. In fact, he was moved up inside the Basilica to one of the side altars next to Michelangelo's Pietà in 2011 once he was named Blessed. So, yes, he will be there in the exact same tomb as John Paul II.
Now explain to us, what is the papal crypt?
Yes, so essentially another name for it is the Basilica's grottos. And what it is there are bodies of over 90 various popes and dignitaries who are buried there, and there are artifacts there, and many, many tourists come, millions, every single year to get close to the remains of the popes and also to just pay respects to the church and to the Catholic Church at large.
All right, Melissa Corsi, thanks so much for that report, and we'll be checking back in with you again.
Of course. Thank you, Christine.
For more insight into the death of Pope Emeritus Benedict, let's bring in Elise Allen, senior correspondent for Crux. She's also standing by in St. Peter's Square. Hi, Elise.
Hi, Christine.
Elise, so the biggest question on everyone's mind right now, how exactly does a reigning pope celebrate the funeral of a retired one? It's something we haven't experienced in our lifetimes.
You're right. This is completely new. It's uncharted territory for the Vatican completely. So one thing we do know is this is not being made up as we go. You know, the Vatican, I think, has been planning this for quite some time. So the answer to your question is, you know, it's going to look a lot like it does for a reigning pope, with some small differences in terms of references to maybe the current pope or the pope's reign. I mean, those things have been changed because, of course, Benedict has not been pope for almost 10 years now. And so little things like that will be changed. But by and large, the ceremony will be very similar to what we saw, for example, with John Paul II in 2005. He is still somebody who occupied the papal office, and he will still have most of those honors. We do know that at some point tomorrow afternoon, they will close his coffin. The laying in state will cease, and tomorrow morning, shortly before 9 a.m., he'll be brought out into the piazza, St. Peter's Square, for faithful to pray in front of him. They're going to pray the rosary before Mass begins, and then, of course, after the funeral, he'll be brought down into the Vatican grottos and entombed there in the same place where John Paul II himself was entombed. So there will still be many of the same touches, the same details, the same special moments as part of the ceremony. But of course it will be more subdued and more simple, because that's the way Benedict himself wanted it, and it's also a different situation because he is an emeritus pope rather than a reigning one.
Right. Now, there's long been speculation about Pope Francis stepping down due to his health issues and his age, rumors he himself has dismissed. But now, with the death of Benedict, do you think he'll reconsider his own retirement? You know, we could have had 3 popes living at once.
We could have, you know, and that would have been an even more unique situation than one we've been in, right, for the last 10 years. So, you know, and I don't know that Francis will consider resigning right away. You know, he's mentioned before that he is open to that, and that he would resign if there comes a moment when he feels like he can't continue, or that he's discerned that the moment has come when there's time for a change. But for the most part, I think Francis has a busy agenda, and he is somebody that wants to continue. We see that he has a busy schedule. You know, even this coming year, he has foreign trips already on the calendar, and he has a global synod process that he's extended for another year into 2024. So he's not slowing down, and I think while he might consider resignation at some point in the future, it's not something I think he's prepared to do anytime soon.
Yeah, he's a busy man. All right, there's been some talk about Catholic conservatives going adrift now that they've lost a pope they align themselves with. What kind of effect will Benedict's passing have on the conservative Catholic movement, if at all, any?
Well, honestly, like you said, I don't know that it will have a lot of effect. I mean, the Catholic conservative movement was around before Benedict, even before John Paul II, and it will last far beyond. There's, you know, always a change in tone around here, you know, like you have some papacies that lean, as you would say, more conservative, or some more progressive. Things are constantly changing depending on the man who's in office, and sort of the movements in the church, or the factions, right, haven't ever changed, and I think they will always be there. And I think Benedict himself is such a towering and important figure that he will continue to be a point of reference, even long beyond his funeral and his passing. You know, as one senior Vatican official put it the other night when I was speaking with him, you know, now he's not going to pray for Benedict, he's going to pray to Benedict. So the conversation with Benedict and seeing Benedict as a point of reference is something I think it's going to continue well into the future.
So really quickly, will Benedict's death open the door to new rules for retired popes?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. That's the question everyone is asking right now. And I think the answer to that is we don't know. Francis has given mixed messages on this. He's said, you know, before that he thinks new rules are needed, but he's also said in an interview, even as recent as last month, that he hasn't thought about changing the rules yet. So I think the answer to your question is we don't know. We're going to have to wait and see.
All right, we definitely will. Elise Allen, senior correspondent for Crux, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Christine.
Currents News will be covering the historic funeral of Pope Benedict live this Thursday. Our comprehensive coverage will begin at 3 o'clock in the morning. That's Thursday, January 5th, right here on Net TV. Later that day, the Diocese of Brooklyn will say their own special goodbye to the Pope Emeritus. There will be a requiem mass at the Cathedral Basilica of St. James at noon. It will be presided over by Brooklyn's Auxiliary Bishop Neil Tiedemann, and it is open to the public. Again, that's on Thursday, January 5th at noon. If you can't make it, you can also watch it live on Net TV. And besides tuning in to Net TV, you can also find complete coverage of Pope Benedict's funeral, as well as articles on his life and legacy on the Tablet's website. That's thetablet.org. We are now learning Pope Benedict's last words. They were spoken in Italian. As he lay on his deathbed Saturday, he faintly mustered, "Lord, I love you." It was heard by one of his nurses at about 3 o'clock in the morning. He passed away just hours later. We'll be right back. Cheers, as if he wore the pinstripes himself, Pope Benedict riding through Yankee Stadium in April 2008. It was the end of a monumental trip to the United States. The cheers were a moment of thanks and appreciation. Just days before, Pope Benedict made history, becoming the first pontiff to meet with survivors of sexual abuse, rousing the faith of millions of Catholics across New York. Currents News' Jessica Easthope spoke with some Brooklynites who remember the moments.
The tablet was there to cover it all. The nose of an Alitalia jet came around the corner and into a private hangar in a remote area of JFK Airport.
We didn't even know he was on the ground at the time.
Ed Wilkinson, editor emeritus of the tablet, first saw the Holy Father through the lens of his camera.
It only lasted for about 10 minutes, and it was supposed to be a non-event, but to those of us who were there, it was really thrilling to see the Holy Father come.
Before he made it to New York, Pope Benedict met with survivors of clergy sex abuse in Washington, D.C. The closed-door meeting was a first step in acknowledging the evil and restoring trust in the church.
He wasn't a guy who wavered. He said exactly what the church teaching was, and he said there's no place in the priesthood for anybody who abuses a child.
I was really proud that he did that. It's a scandal, never should have happened, it shouldn't happen again. Those are the things he said all the time.
The Pope's fast-paced days in the Big Apple were marked by some iconic moments, like when he prayed for the souls lost on September 11, 2001 at Ground Zero, in a city whose wounds of that day were still fresh, even 7 years later.
People's sensitivities were still raw. You know, to see him going down there and to kneeling down on a kneel and praying for those, who had died that day, it was a very moving time.
But it was cheers not even the Yankees themselves could bring on that brought the Pope into Yankee Stadium to say Mass for 57,000 people.
You got a sense of the immensity of the event, of the stadium, that this was a big place, and the Holy Father was waving to everybody, and he had his papal cross. He was very well accepted.
And another first, on his trip to New York City, Pope Benedict became the first Pope to enter a Jewish place of worship. He made an unprecedented visit to the Park East Synagogue on the eve of Passover. Arrangements he made himself.
It wasn't something that anybody here had thought of or arranged, but he was known for being interreligious.
His departure was more like a party. 1,000 people, including then Vice President Dick Cheney and the Second Lady, saw the Holy Father off. He thanked Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio by name.
Just kindness. He exuded kindness in every way.
During his visit to New York, Bishop DiMarzio said a pope who was misunderstood and had a reputation for being a harsh enforcer couldn't have been more gentle. Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
The Bishop of Brooklyn, Robert Brennan, was there when Benedict came to the Big Apple. He met with the Pope Emeritus multiple times over the years, and they had several personal conversations.
He was amazing. He looks you in the eye. You're the only person there in front of him. And there's this soft, gentle tone to his voice. But he asks you very interested questions. He looks at you, asks you what your job is. He asked me, well, so what do you do? What does that involve? How are you doing? He was just deeply interested in me, in the person in front of him. And I get the impression he did that fairly regularly. I mentioned the soft tone of his voice with that little German accent. It's kind of like a grandfatherly approach that puts you at ease immediately.
Pope Benedict was actually the pontiff who first appointed Bishop Brennan an auxiliary bishop for the Diocese of Rockville Centre in 2012. As we continue to honor Benedict's life and legacy, let's take a look at the Pope Emeritus's life journey. Pope Benedict was born Joseph Ratzinger on April 16, 1927. He was ordained a priest in 1951. Some 20 years after that, in 1977, he was ordained a bishop. A month later, he was fast-tracked to cardinal. He was elected pope and took the name Benedict XVI just days after his birthday on April 19, 2005. As successor of St. Peter, Pope Benedict made a number of decisions that changed the course of Catholic history. For example, in 2010, he approved procedures for handling accusations of clerical sexual abuse and the removal of priests found guilty. Then in 2013, he became the first Holy Father in almost 600 years to resign, citing declining strength. That left the world with two popes, alive and living on the same grounds. That's sending thousands descending into St. Peter's Square, both pilgrims and tourists alike. Currents News' Kelsey Gussie is there and spoke with mourners.
The Pope Emeritus has been lying in state since Monday, and the people in this line have been waiting for hours. They say it's not only an opportunity to bid a final farewell, but also a moment in history they didn't want to miss. Many of those who filed into the Basilica made the sign of the cross and stopped to pray. Others took pictures.
It was heavy in there. I've never been in there. Not only like what I experienced the building itself, but also seeing the body. It was just very emotional and really powerful.
Others in line aren't only tourists, but pilgrims, specifically making this journey to say thank you.
It was really moving. It was more so than I thought it would be. It was very crowded, and you have to keep moving. You can't stop, but it meant a lot to see him.
This funeral will be unlike anything they've ever seen, unlike anything the modern church has seen in over 600 years.
I mean, it's something you have to experience. I think if you're here at the right time, see all the believers and stuff like this, it's very nice.
And I think whatever one feels about this or that pope, however much one personally agrees or disagrees with the policies, this is someone who's dedicated his entire life to God. So, I have a profound respect for that.
Vatican police say some 65,000 people paid their respects on Monday, but there's no confirmation yet as to whether Pope Francis visited the Basilica. But he did begin the new year remembering his predecessor, praying for Benedict's passage into heaven. In St. Peter's Square, Kelsey Gussie, Currents News.
Now let's take a look at some of the other stories making news tonight. The man accused of opening fire in the Sunset Park subway station last April expected to plead guilty on Tuesday. Frank James faces life in prison. Meanwhile, Islamic extremism may be the reason why 19-year-old Trevor Bickford allegedly attacked 3 New York City police officers with a machete in Times Square New Year's Eve. And some 500 migrants arrived by boat in the Florida Keys over the weekend, forcing the closure of a national park. New York Governor Kathy Hochul is considering new regulations after New York becomes the 6th state to approve human composting. That's when a body decomposes over the course of a month to become planting soil. Some see this as an environmentally friendly alternative to cremation. Others, like Dennis Paus, the executive director of the New York State Catholic Conference, feel differently. He said, quote, "The process of composting is associated with the sustainable disposition of organic household or agricultural waste to be repurposed as fertilizer for gardens or crops. But human bodies are not household waste. They are vessels of the soul." Still to come on Currents News, a solemn moment on the football field. Teammates bowing their heads in prayer after a player collapsed during the Monday Night Football game. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin is in critical condition as doctors have him sedated and hope for signs of improvement. Hamlin's team says his heart stopped after a tackle against the Cincinnati Bengals during Monday Night Football. Players, coaches, and fans watched in silence and horror as Hamlin received CPR after a cardiac arrest. After 20 minutes of treatment, an ambulance took him to Cincinnati's UC Medical Center, where he's in intensive care. Buffalo's quarterback Josh Allen tweeted, "Please pray for our brother."
Surround him with your angels, surround their healing power. So touch him right now as we speak. Lord, I pray in the most holy name of Jesus Christ. I pray in the most holy name of Jesus Christ. Touch him right now, Father. Lord, in the most holy name of Jesus Christ.
Amen. Amen. And pray they did. Fans from both teams came together in solidarity to pray for Hamlin to recover. Not only did they join in prayer inside and outside the stadium, but people came together at the hospital as well. One fan said he's happy to see two cities come together to support Hamlin. And as Hamlin fights for his life, he'd be happy to know that his Christmas toy drive is thriving. The fundraiser skyrocketed to over $4.5 million as of Tuesday afternoon. It easily surpassed the $2,500 goal. Hamlin's mission statement for the GoFundMe page reads, quote, "As I embark on my journey to the NFL, I will never forget where I came from, and I'm committed to using my platform to positively impact the community that raised me." The tablet newspaper has also spent the entire Advent season trying to make Christmas bright for children around Brooklyn and Queens. The paper has raised more than $107,000 for kids in need. They are so incredibly close to their goal of $125,000, and you can help them reach that goal before the Christmas season officially wraps up. Just make a check out to the Bright Christmas Fund and mail it to Bright Christmas LB number 2118, P.O. Box 95,000. That's in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and the zip code 19195. Or you can make your donation online at thetablet.org/brightchristmas. The Haitian community kicked off 2023 with their Independence Day celebration. St. Jerome's Church in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, filled with joyful music and dozens of flags to celebrate the island nation's freedom from France more than 200 years ago. The Mass in French and Creole was celebrated by Bishop Brennan, who called the Liturgy of National Pride and Faith another example of what makes the Diocese of Brooklyn so blessed. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Before we go, let's take one more look at the life and legacy of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI. Hope to see you again next time.